How's everybody doing? You're watching Slot Car Mayhem. I'm John, and this is episode 2 of New to Carrera. And in this episode, we're going to do what everybody's been waiting for, and we're going to get some cars running. In episode 1, we assembled the layout, and we got everything powered up, and we know everything works. So now in this case, we're going to go ahead and get the cars moving. That being said, there needs to be a little bit of understanding on how the digital system works. If you've come from something like HO, an analog system, you're pretty familiar with a hand controller that controls a lane and controls the current of electricity going to that particular lane, and that's what the car responds to. The digital system is completely different, and in a nutshell how that works is all the information is sent constantly through the entire track regardless of lane. The lanes stay powered constantly, and the information is of course sent from the control unit through the entire track system all at one time, and the cars are now programmed to listen to only a specific controller. And the control channels are pretty easy to understand. Control channels 1 through 6 are for the hand controllers, the driver controlled stations. Control channel number 7 is reserved for a ghost car or autonomous car. And control channel number 8 is reserved for a pace car or safety car. It all works very simply, and it's very easy to understand. Once you do it once or twice, you've got it in your head, and it's you just move forward and you don't even think about it. So you can kind of put away any reservations you may have about not understanding the digital. Carrera makes it extremely simple to go ahead and work with. Okay, let's go ahead and grab a car. We've got a car here, and as you can tell, it's not working on any of the controllers. So you can see that it's not working, and we need to get it to work. That's very simple. The first thing we need to do is make sure nothing's on the track. Make sure all cars are off the track, because any programming you do to one car will affect all cars on the track. So if you have 4 cars on the track and you program them to say controller number 1, they're all going to respond to controller number 1. So when you're doing programming, always make sure that you're dealing with just the car you want. That's the number 1 rule. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to take these controllers here, and we need to tell the control unit which one is which and what they're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little closer so you can see what's happening, and we'll show you how to do that. It's very, very simple. Okay, before we do anything, the first thing we need to do is tell the control unit which controller is which and which channel these are on. How we do that is, let's ignore the flashing blue light here. That's for the app connect. That has nothing to do with what we're doing here. We're going to focus on the wireless dongle, and you can see this little red light dancing around. That tells us it's in seek mode. Basically, it's just looking for information. How we determine what we want to do with the controllers is, let's say we want to take this one here and we want to program it to be channel 1. There's a little red button here called set. You just push that button one time, and now it shows number 1. If you want it to be 2, hit it again, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it'll cycle back to nothing. So keep hitting the button until you get the channel number you want. In this case, we want channel number 1. Once you've got that, you look at the controller. We've got a little LED here. That's your charge indicator. But right here on top, there's a little button. Once this is set to the number you want, just push that little button. Now this is going back to doing its little dance, and this controller is now channel number 1. We'll do the same thing with this controller here, except we'll put that on channel number 2. Once again, same thing, push the little button, and it's doing its little dance. That's it. That's how you program your controllers. It's that simple. Okay, I'm just doing a little close-up here so you can actually see what we have for buttons on the control unit. This button here is for programming your speed. I'll show you how to do that. This is your brake button. That's for programming the brake effect the cars will have. This is for fuel. If you have a pit lane and you're running a fuel type race, this will allow you to set the size of your fuel tank. The code button is what we use to program which channel the car is going to respond to, be it channels 1 through 6, which are the driver controlled channels, or channels 7 or 8, which is for a ghost car or a pace car. The escape pace car button, the escape button will cancel whatever you're doing, but if you're racing and if you have a pit lane, this will pull the pace car out. The start enter button, this is what you use for starting your races, or if you're setting speed, brake, or fuel. Once those are done, you have to hit the enter button or the start button in order to get it to lock in and program. The switch here is only usable if you have the pit lane, and this is for your fuel scenario, and you can either have no fueling on, which would basically say, okay, I'm running out of fuel, I need to pull into the pit stop and get more fuel. And the real is for realistic fueling, and the only difference between on and realistic is the realistic will simulate the weight of the fuel. So if you pull out of the pits with a full tank of gas, you're going to be slower than you were coming into the pits with an empty tank. And of course you have your on-off switch for your system. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a car and get that programmed. Okay, we've got a car here on the track. The track is on and ready to go, and as you can see, it's not responding to either controller. Okay, which is fine. So what I want to do is I want to set this car up to respond to controller number 1. That in itself is very simple. We're going to hit the code button, and you see that this first light here will light up. The first light, one light only, that is for channels 1 through 6. If we hit it a second time, it's going to show 2 lights here, and this will be for a ghost car if we want to program it as a ghost car. And if we hit it a third time, 3 lights are going to light up, and that will be for a pace car. And if you hit it again, it goes back to 1, and it'll just cycle through. So in this case, we want to have a driver controlled car, which is your first light here. Now that that's set for this, now we need to tell it which controller we want. So in this case, we're going to program it. We'll program it to this one. All you have to do is hit your lane change button, which is this little red button right here. Now, I don't think you can see it, but the headlights are flashing and the car made a little beeping noise. Okay, now we hit the, now it responds. If we pick up controller number 1, it's not going to respond. It only listens to controller number 2. Okay, now that I have the car responding to a controller, I'm going to go ahead and run it around the track and see what we have. Well, what we find out is the car is quite quick, and I can hardly drive this car on this track. As you can see, the speed is way too high. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the speed for this track. Okay, in this case, the cars are set up at full speed, and full speed is really not usable on this particular layout. The longest straight is 2 2/3 straights long, and that's at a lane change. Really, you don't even give there's not enough straights to give the car any sort of leg room to even get up and run before you're having to slow down for another turn. So we're going to dial the speed back. This is great if you have kids that you want to race with, or if you're completely new to the system and you want to learn it. Just a lot of different avenues why you would want to slow them down. Here, usually 3 seconds is a good lap time, and you still have to drive the car at about 3 seconds. So We're going to go ahead and we're going to set it up and slow the car down a little bit. So once again, make sure that the car you want to program is the only one on the track. And now that we have it programmed to a controller, we're going to come over here and we're going to hit the speed button. And what you see is a bunch of lights. This is telling me it's full power. If we come down here, that's on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a setting of 1. That would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to set my speed at 1, 2, 3. That should be pretty good to get started with. Once you set your speed to about where you want, you have to hit the enter start button right here to lock it in. Okay, it'll do its little dance and it'll go back to race mode. And now we can run the car. Currently, right now, I'm running it at full throttle, holding it down, and it's just staying on the track completely with no issue. So we're going to speed it up a little bit. Okay, once again we go to our speed button, and we can just cycle and hit the speed button to increase it one step at a time, and we'll try that. Okay, that's a little better. The car's a little more lively, a little quicker off the throttle, and I have to drive it through the turns. So that's about where we want it. You can see I'm getting a pretty good lap time out of it. And that's about what we're after. Okay, we've done that. Let's take a look at brakes. We can have a braking effect. And when you let off the throttle, either the car will coast a little bit, or it'll come to a much quicker stop depending on what you want. And that's more so a matter of personal preference. If you're new to slot cars, I would probably suggest going with full braking. However, if you have more experience, especially if you're running with no magnets, sometimes having minimal brakes has a huge benefit by allowing you to kind of push through and coast through a corner, and actually does pretty well. The trade-off is if you have a short pit lane, sometimes it can be a little hard to stop in the pits if you don't have enough braking. So that's a matter of personal preference, and that's something you can experiment with and find out what feels good to you. So brakes are set just the way speed is, the same exact way. You hit the brake button, and you can see right now we have 100% braking, and you could cycle through just like you could 1 through 10 on your braking system. And I'm going to set brakes about the same as speed, and we'll start from there. Hit your start enter button, and that will program your brakes. Fuel capacity. If you have a pit lane and you're going to be running a fuel type race, hit your fuel button, and this will do the same thing, 1 through 10, and it will show you the capacity of your fuel tank. The fun part about using a pit lane, and if you're doing a lot of pitting, fuel type pitting throughout a race, sometimes it's a lot of fun if you can develop the right type of strategy to have cars set up with different fuel tank sizes. Because when you're in the pits, if you have a larger tank, guess what? It takes longer to refuel. So you can really stagger out your pitting events. Instead of having everybody dive into the pit lane at once, you can spread it out, and you'll find a good balance of what works and keeps everything relatively consistent. But it does a great job of, 1 or 2 cars in the pits, and they pull out, 3 or 4 more laps later, a couple more cars are coming in, and it spreads it out quite a bit and makes it look pretty good. But fuel's done exactly the same way. You set it to the value that you want, and you hit enter. And that's it. And we have now programmed this car to run off the controller, and just that one particular controller only. Okay, now after we have tuned the car to the track, we'll go ahead and take a few more laps and see what we have. That's probably a good starting point, especially if you're learning. Okay, and that takes care of getting the cars programmed to the track. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to focus on a couple of the other little features of the cars, just so you can see them, about how to turn lights on and off and things like that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about light function, how to turn the lights on and off. I switched cars because this particular Capri here has got little covers over the headlights and they're not nearly bright enough to see on video in this case here, so I programmed this car to the other controller, and I'll show you how the light function works. Okay, as you're running, driving around, what you have to do is you've got to come to a full stop. Come to a full stop and take your hand off the controller, let it sit for a couple seconds, and then just hit the lane change button, and you see the headlights come on. And you can turn them on and off at will just by hitting the lane change button. Okay, and then you can proceed. Okay, another great feature about the Carrera Digital is the lighting. Besides the headlights that we also have taillights and brake lights, and they respond. The taillights respond just like the headlights, of course. Whenever the headlights are on, the taillights are on, and you can cycle them on and off. There's also brake lights, and when you're on the throttle, everything's fine. When you let off the throttle, the brake lights come on. If you have your headlights and taillights on, when you hit your throttle, you still have brake lights. So that's a neat little feature that just really brings a whole new element to the racing aspect of things. Let's talk about how to program a ghost car, also known as an autonomous car, and this will run a race almost as if there was a driver. It's dumb though, it just goes at a set speed and it will randomly change lanes, but it starts and stops with the race. So let's go ahead and let's say we want to set this car up as a ghost car. Okay, we go back to our code button, and remember code number 1 here, that's for setting for driver controllers 1 through 6. So we hit it again, we have 2 lights. 2 is for ghost car mode. Once we have that set, we'll take any controller, it doesn't matter at this point. Just take a controller and hit the lane change button, and you're going to see the lights are going to flash and the car's going to make a little beep. Now, at this point, don't hit the lane change button again. Go ahead and set your speed, and we're going to slowly hit the throttle till we get the car to be the speed that we want. Once it's at a good speed, then you can hit the lane change button, and the car is now locked into that speed. It's very simple. In order to stop it, you have to stop your race. So we'll just hit the stop cancel button, and that stops the car. One thing that is very important to be mindful of, if you have ghost cars and you're running ghost cars, you want to make sure that even if they're in the same lane, it's fine. You want to make sure that your autonomous or ghost cars are in front. The reason why is the reaction time from the control unit is much quicker than a human's reaction time, and if you have a ghost car behind a driver controlled car, when the race starts, that ghost car is almost certainly going to run into the back of the driver controlled car. So if you have multiple ghost cars set up, 2, 3, 4, whatever, go ahead and set them up, that's fine. Make sure that they're at the front of the pack. You always want to do that. The ghost cars are relatively dumb, and they don't care who's where. They'll just change lanes when they feel like it. And you know, you can have quite a few collisions if you're running a lot of ghost cars. That being said, that does add a whole new element to your racing strategy, because instead of just trying to pass a ghost car near a lane change, you've got to consider the fact that it may cut you off, and you've got to be mindful of that. So the ghost cars are definitely a lot of fun, especially if you're running by yourself. they seem to work quite well. Okay, at this point we're going to run a real quick little simulated little run using a ghost car and one driver controlled car. Hit your start button, it counts down, and you're off. You see what I'm talking about, the lag? Okay. I just nerfed the ghost car, that's funny. And if you need to stop the race, just hit the start button again, and the race will halt immediately. Okay, that's it. That's how easy it is to program the controllers and the cars and to get the system running. So now we have cars running, and it works pretty well. I've shown you how to set a driver control car and also how to set a ghost car. If you have a pit lane, you can set up a pace car, and that will work. The process for doing that is identical to setting up a ghost car, except when you hit the code button, you set it to code 3 instead of code 2. That's it. Other than that, it's identical. The difference is, of course, if you're setting up a pace car, once you set the speed, it's immediately going to try to find its way home and park itself. But that's a whole different avenue for a whole different chapter. So we'll go ahead and we'll end this. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you learned something from this. I hope I made it as easy as possible. It doesn't take long. Once you do it once or twice, you can do it in about 20 seconds or less. So it does not take long to set these cars up. And like I said, it's been completely foolproof and it's worked very well. So that will conclude episode 2 of New to Carrera. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing episode 3 here pretty shortly. And that's going to involve using the App Connect, and I'm going to be using the Smart Race app to go ahead and do some app race management, and that brings in lap counting, all sorts of different things. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.